lunch, and I'm really very happy that we have been able to bring in the best of minds on best of issues, contemporary issues, burning issues that we needed or we thought this policy advice required. So very lucky. In that very context, there's expected to be a substantial change in the new international economic order. There's so much that has happened in the US. We have all seen the bitter battle politically that has been fought in the US. And we have also seen how new developments have happened. We are all aware of those developments. All across the world, every policymaker is now thinking of what the new economic order will be. The president-elect has already announced, if I can call it, earth-shaking policies. Some were anticipated, but the speed with which he has announced them has already sent lots of people thinking about where is it going to end? Will international trade really continue? Will protectionist policies take over? And you know that China, Canada, in each of these countries, the thought process has begun and policy discussions have already begun. In the last 4 years, globally, we as economists have been feeling that for business, commerce, and growth, peace is very important. But as we have witnessed, there have been unending wars, prolonged wars, and seems to have no end to it. How does that now translate? We know Trump is a businessman, and as a businessman, obviously, he has to, for growth and development, ensure peace. But then there is a roaring business and defense industry too. How do you balance that? So what we thought at EGROW, while we were continuing with our series, we canceled the one on originally scheduled for today and requested everybody at such a short notice to come and join and participate in our thought exercise as to what we in India or we should think about in both the wars, they impact us, as well as the changing economic environment domestically and globally. So we thought through this, and we have then been very fortunate to divide this whole exercise into two parts. Today, we are doing defense, and we are doing the global economic order, keeping in mind India. And most probably on December 13th, the Friday, we are doing at the new International Economic Order, where we are inviting Dr. Arvind Virmani to speak about the multipolar world or a unipolar world, and two diplomats to discuss this whole issue. So this is a two-series webinar, which we are doing on Trump and the economy. Today's session is being chaired by Professor Dholakia, a dear friend of mine. Sometimes I feel he's more like my mentor. He's been, as you know, the economics area faculty at IIM Ahmedabad. He was on the RBI chair, and he has received lots of awards while being there. He has participated extensively in various committees of the government. He has been on the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank, and now he chairs the RBI. So his spectrum of Indian economy and the global economy obviously is very, very large. We have Lieutenant General Rajeshwar. He was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery in December 1980, a gunner and an aviator. He is an alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College, Army War College, and National Defense College in New Delhi and Philippines. He has actively taken part in Operation Meghdoot and Operation Rakshak. He commanded a medium regiment in Operation Parakram, an infantry brigade on the line of control, a counter-insurgency force in Jammu and Kashmir, and a corps in the desert sector. He has served on key staff assignments and UN key peacekeeping missions in Mozambique and Rwanda. His apex responsibilities, both tri-service, included the Chief of Integrated Defense Staff to the Chairman, Chiefs of Staff Committee, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Andaman and Nicobar Command, from where he retired in May 2020. Our next defense speaker is Lieutenant General Dr. Rakesh Sharma. He was commissioned in Gorkha Rifles in 1977 and had a career spanning 40 years in the army. He has had extensive operational experience in Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast, and on the western borders. He had trained the Botswana Army for 3 years in Africa and attended the National War College at Abuja, Nigeria. Lieutenant General Sharma attended the NDC at New Delhi. He was Research Fellow at Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis and has done PhD in Defense Studies. He commanded the Fire and Fury Corps in Ladakh, responsible for Kargil, Siachen Glacier in eastern Ladakh, facing both Pakistan and China. He was the Adjutant General of the Indian Army, responsible for the HR management and superannuated in 2017. He has been awarded by the President of India. He is a regular participant in seminars, TV debates, and regularly writes for newspapers and military journals. He is currently a distinguished fellow with Vivekananda International Foundation and Center for Land Warfare Studies, and on the Executive Council of Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis and of Global Counterterrorism Council. Our next speaker is Professor Ashima Goyal. Very proud to say she is advisor at EGROW Foundation. She has until very recently been member of the Reserve Bank of India's Monetary Policy Committee, a very prestigious place. And before that, she was member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, from where she left for the MPC. She has been with the IGIDR in Bombay. She is active in the Indian policy debate and has served on several government committees as Professor Dholakia. She edits a Raleigh journal in macroeconomics and finance and contributes a monthly column to the Hindu Business Line. She was a visiting fellow at the Economic Growth Center, Yale University, and a Fulbright Senior Research Fellow at Claremont Graduate University, USA. Her research has received national and international recognition and awards. She won 2 Best Awards at GDN meetings at Tokyo and Rio de Janeiro, was selected as one of the 4 most powerful women in economics, a thought leader by Business Today 2008. She was the first Professor P.R. Brahmananda Memorial Research Grant awardee for a study on history of monetary policy in India since independence, which was published by Springer in 2014. She also widely writes in newspapers, and she has more than 100 articles in national and international journals. With this brief introduction of each of the speakers, I hand over the session to Professor Dholakia to take the proceedings further. Professor.
Thank you, Professor Charan Singh. It is always a pleasure to be a part of the EGROW webinar series. EGROW is known to be really discussing some of the burning issues and some of the most relevant aspects that influence the economy, the policies, and likely to have great impact both socio-economically and environmentally, and I mean culturally in a way. So this is always a very nice thing to know about, and to get involved in these activities of EGROW Foundation. And Charan Singh is the leader in all these matters. Anyway, today's topic has been President Trump. It is not just Trump. President Trump. The wars, not war, but the wars, and the global economy impact. I can see the relevance and the content, including the exact precise kind of titling, because it is not only one war. It is a political war or the physical war that is always fought, and there are several wars which are going on, as Charan Singh has already mentioned. But the most important war, which is likely to begin with President Trump being there, are the tariff wars and the trade wars. Now, that is a expectation. That is something, people are speculating. As I was discussing, I was talking to Professor Ashima Goyal, and she said that it is, Trump is a complex personality. People are talking everything about him, and is so unpredictable. Now, it's a very nice thing to know that yes, there is somebody who is very highly unpredictable in terms of all the decisions and all the things that he can be taking. However, for a change, he has committed himself to a few things. He has given that as a promise to the American public that he will bring the pride to America back. And this is very relevant, very important, because this is the second term of Trump. And as we all know, the presidential system in USA provides only 2 terms to any person, any one particular person. This being his second term, this is the last chance that he has. If he wants to do anything, this is the chance. Otherwise, he has to forget about it. Now, I don't think that Trump is a personality who will forget about things. That means that whatever he wants to do, he is likely to do in the next 4 years, beginning from January 20th, 2025. I think that is what we are all looking for. And we have 2 very eminent speakers on the defense side, defense analysts, and I'm sure we all look forward to their analysis of what are likely to be the impacts of President Trump being there on the global scenario. So without wasting any more time, I hand over the platform to Mr. Rajeshwar, and I'll request him to, confine his comments, etc., to about 18 minutes. Okay, Mr. Rajeshwar.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Right. Firstly, let me at the outset thank Dr. Charan, the EGROW Foundation, for inviting us all over for the webinar. Greetings to the Chair, Professor Dholakia, esteemed panelists, and dear participants. A very good afternoon to you. When Dr. Charan actually told me about this topic, I also felt that it is, scoping in the dark, because like everyone knows, And when I was going through his list of Trump 1.0 picks and who worked for him and how many rotated out, right? So I could make out that he's unpredictable, defined many times over. So how do you predict what is going to go going forward with a person like this? So what I did was I looked up two of papers, one which was based on the Council on Foreign Relations, which basically encapsulated what he did in Trump 1.0. But more importantly, I leaned on General H.R. McMaster's book, which came out in 2020, but it was At War with Ourselves, rather 2024 in August, Overcoming Chaos in the Trump White House. Because that gave insights to how decision making, was being affected during the times, and also gave out what is likely to some extent. And of course, finally, you have the Trump 2.0 picks or the team. So you can if you read about them, broadly what is happening. So let us look at Trump 1.0. I'll look from that perspective. One of the fundamental documents in 2018 was their national security strategy. He signed in December 2017. It came into effect from 18. And basically, he was looking at preserving peace through strength. And in the contest for power, he called out China as a revisionist power along with Russia. And he gave out the reasons, and that affects everyone globally, actually. While one may consider it's bilateral, but it actually transcends that. So he was looking at, that China is displacing US in the Indo-Pacific. It is expanding its state-driven economy, and it's very quickly modernizing its military. And as far as Russia, he read in 2018 that they were wanting to restore their great power status and establish a sphere of influence near its borders. This is in the document even now. And he called out rogue states of Iran and North Korea as per American perception. And then, of course, last in the pecking order were transnational threat organizations, which were the jihadi terrorist groups. So this is what he laid out. And this was 2 years into his presidency. But at the very outset in 2016, he ended up speaking to the Taiwanese president, which was unprecedented, and started increasing US Navy patrols, in and around Taiwan and South China Sea. He pushed for more arms sales, but asked the island to pay for its protection. And then in somewhere towards the end of 2020, he told the Chinese that I will reject, your claims on South China Sea based on, if you continue with the behavior that you're exhibiting. And he thought they were soft on North Korea. So basically, because they supply oil and refined petroleum to them, and they don't, control them very much. Of course, everyone is aware that he imposed about 18% tariff on trade based on IPR issues, economic espionage, he called, currency manipulation, and so on. And then, of course, also he put into place technology restrictions, export controls on semiconductors and chip making equipment. All this, incidentally, also intersects with various facets of wars, which takes place in almost every domain. As far as Russia, while he called Putin, President Putin, a genius and a savvy person, he extended President Obama's sanctions on Russia, which had followed after the Crimea annexation. In 2019, he withdrew from a very big 1987 arms control treaty, which was the Intermediate Range Nuclear Treaty, which actually capped weapons, which were in the intermediate range, stating that Russia was in violation, and also that he wanted to include China in this. But he came out of that, he pulled out of it. And then in later, he also withdrew from an Open Skies Treaty, which is a 2002 treaty, which had surveillance flights all over Europe and even till that time over Russia. As far as the Middle East is concerned, which is now a theater of war, he's always exhibited a strong support for Israel, which he called a cherished ally. No support for a Palestinian state. And after the 7th October Hamas attack, he professed more support for Israel again. He also supported the Saudis with the Prince MBS in their Yemen campaign. And he confronted Iran, who he said was a leading state sponsor of terrorism. So he withdrew from the JCPOA, which was an Iran nuclear deal with the US in 2018, imposed sanctions, and also curbed down all people doing business with Iran, which affected a lot of countries, including us. In 2020, he went further and ordered a strike on, the Revolutionary Guards chief Qasem Soleimani, which again disturbed the entire equation in the Middle East. He designated Houthis as a terrorist organization. Some of these things which I'm stating were what he did. Some were actually repealed by or rolled back by the Biden administration, but are likely to again come into effect. As far as the South Asia was concerned, he initially stopped dating Pakistan. But then somewhere towards the second half of his presidency, he ended up calling Prime Minister Imran Khan for a meeting on Afghanistan. Also, what he did was he abandoned the support that they had extended to the Afghan nationalist government and their army, and went in for signing a withdrawal pact or agreement with Taliban in February 2020. So in a lot of places, the decision making has been, pretty up and down. As far as NATO was concerned, he asked them that they have to pay 2% of the GDP for their defense. Otherwise, that he would pull out of the collective defense clause, which meant an attack on one country would be an attack on everyone. He also updated the defense missile plan, the missile defense plan for the theater in 2019. And he, in fact, in 2020, he threatened to abandon the alliance itself, saying NATO is dead. As far as his own, military was concerned, he upped the defense budget hugely in 2016 to about 700 billion. Pushed it up to 740 by 2021. Today it stands at 823 billion or 24 billion. But what is important is how does he decide? What General McMaster, and he's a very renowned author and now with Stanford, says he's very instinctive. But the major issue is, will he make tough decisions like he made before? And then the next thing is, will he stay the course having made the decision? Because he feels that sometimes he does not stick to them. He is impressed by strong personalities, like, I described before about President Putin and also Kim Jong-un, who in a surprising move, he, met in Singapore and described him that he had struck a good rapport with him. He's also, if you recall, in the election speeches, said that I will end this war with Ukraine in one day. This, of course, has got complicated because President Biden has given the clearance to Ukraine to use long-range missiles into Russia. And on the other side, Putin has changed his nuclear doctrine, which has complicated matters, where he has very clearly said that such an act will end up with Russia using nuclear weapons. And also, he has kept it open as to the countries who are supporting Ukraine or any non-nuclear opposition against him. They could also be a target country. So much happens to be seen as to how these next 45 days take place, because, of course, on the 6th of January, as we all know, yes, President Trump would have to be, there's an electoral vote count, which Vice President Kamala Harris will have to ratify that. And then on 20th January, he'll come. But what has happened also, I think, yesterday or day before is President Trump has appointed General Kellogg as envoy to both Ukraine and Russia. Some places I picked up that he promised that before I come in, I'll have a settlement. So there is some work which is going on, maybe in Mar-a-Lago, which has already started. Okay. As far as other picks are concerned, when you look at his picks, whether it's the Vice President J.D. Vance, who is pretty young, he's just about 40 years, but his other people like the NSA, Mike Waltz, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they appear to be China hawks. One, their statements throughout have been to impose something or the other on them, on Chinese. And of course, they also say that they will not support Ukraine, aid to Ukraine. This is what they have already called out. His Secretary of Defense is also, unlike his previous secretaries, Pete Hegseth, is also a hawk. So we have to still wait and watch as to whether Trump 1.0, strand of thought will remain the same, or now that he has got a fresh team, which doesn't have people like before who had a lot of experience, it has fresher faces. Will they bring something new to the table as far as geostrategy, geopolitics, geoeconomics is concerned, and will it make a change to everyone else on the globe? Because whatever the Russians do, or whatever, the Americans do, the Russians and Chinese are bound to counter, and that will affect everyone else who is in the ecosystem, be it Japan, be it Korea, be it Taiwan, or whoever, whichever other country, Australia, or all these spheres will get affected very largely. So we have to wait and watch what is going to happen in the 45 days, and then the policies that are announced once President Trump is in chair. I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajeshwar. Now, I invite Dr. Rakesh.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Professor Charan Singh, for inviting me. Thank you, Professor Dholakia and Professor Ashima. It's a pleasure being here again on EGROW. I know when EGROW grew, and it is growing and growing. So compliments to you, Professor Charan, for bringing this one so far. Best for me is to say I agree with everything which Jan Rajeshwar has said and finish it out here. But that would not be nice, because that will be not what you wanted. Now, what I might sound a little erratic myself, because this is an erratic subject, so it has to be spoken in an erratic manner. I think we are at an inflection point in the world. It's a very complex situation, and it's not economically. In fact, anybody who talks about any order, whether you talk about geopolitical order or military or geostrategic order or even economic order, I think we are preempting the world. It is such a difficult stage that it is more disorder than order that we can see ahead in the world. So let's start with this basic premise that there is a complexity which hasn't been seen earlier, and this will be a stepping stone. One. So the question, I will not do too much of rear view mirror driving. I will try and say think about something about the future. Will President Trump be less constrained in T 2.0 than he was in T 1.0? He has now a popular vote. He has the support. The public is with him. It is not a vote based on only delegates. He has a popular vote. So there is a change here from 2016, and from 2016 2024 is grossly different in any which way that we know. Whether it is by wars or it is by the COVID that passed through here, or the economic order, or where the China has grown and India is growing, and other poles are starting up. So the fact of the matter is the world is not 16. This is world is 24, and it's grossly different. So will he be less constrained? One. As ma'am had rightly pointed out, he'll be unpredictable. Well, of course, he's known to be unpredictable for the last 30, 40 years. So I copy the same phrase, he'll be unpredictable. He has always been known 30, 40 years and erratic in decision making. Will he remain erratic in decision making? Yes. As the Rajeshwar has said, that he is instinctive. But instinctive being apart, that instinctiveness can also be contrived, shown to as instinctive behavior. He's very highly transactional. Everything has to be measured in terms of transaction that he does. And does he bring a fundamental change? Now, I also wish to, before taking a step forward, talk about the United States itself. Is United States a monolith now when he's been elected? In fact, the United States is the most confused country today. The population is so very well divided. There is vicious politics on either side of the aisle. It is not that the mass follows the Trump and the other mass also Bhedchal. It's not true. So there is a vicious division inside United States. To say that he'll be able to push through whatever he wants to push through, despite having majority in both Senate and House of Representatives and the Supreme Court, will not going to be that simple, because there is the viciousness that comes up in United States today. Now, having said that, I take 3 to 4 cues for what he's been speaking. In Chicago, he said tariff. Now, the word tariff has been speaking so often that undoubtedly he said, the day I am sworn in, I signed a 10% tariff against China. 10% tariff. Biden has just done 100% tariff on EV vehicles and EV products against China. The European Union has increased from 14% to 36% tariffs on green energy, which is now the showcase of China. So he's wanting to increase 10% more. So tariff is one big word. And to say that we will come out unscathed of tariffs, that may not be true. Second issue is migration or immigration. Now, immigration, he bounces on immigration. Walls to be created in China Mexico and Canada. He speaks in such terms so often. Immigration, is immigration such a easiest phenomena? Can he push 10 million people out in short while? What will it cost to push these millions of illegal immigrants from United States out? He says immigration a big way, but it is not a simple thing that you can just push immigrations out. The third major thing is disengagement. Now, he wants to disengage, as you rightly pointed out. There would be disengagement. There is a disengagement issue. He disengaged from the treaty with Iran. He disengaged earlier with the on NATO Article 5. He said, I don't like it. who should be the maximum worried person on disengagement in the world? I think the people who should be most worried are the European Union, because this experiment called European Union is going to go for a six the minute he disengages. So it's an issue of disengagement, how far that he can push it across disengagement from the world, that MAGA business and America first business, how far, well, that has to be seen. But that's a very big, these three are the biggest threats. People say we will be hurt by the immigration, that H1B visa, etc., etc. Why should we be worried? If Indians are not able to go across to United States, where Indians are in India, they will work for India. Then they don't have to go to United States if they don't get H1B visa. So we don't have to be excited about H1B. But universities of United States run, and so do of UK and of Canada and of Australia. Universities run on students and go from here and pay 1 crore every child. So the universities are going to pack up in case the children don't go there. Students apart. Now, the other part is, so I say that there is a viciousness which comes up in United States, and that we'll have to see as to how the viciousness comes out of here. Now, what happens to European Union? European Union has put, as it is, European Union is having severe problems among themselves. The countries, each country is voicing different opinions on different things. There is no leader in European Union worth the name. There is not one gentleman who can stand up and say, I am the leader of European Union. Each one of the countries moving apart. They have their different policies with China vis-a-vis what United States has got. So then it apparently seems that now time is in Trump 2.0, West is in war with itself. Economically, there is a war on, geostrategically and politically, in every which way. The West, the divisions within the West are so significant in 2024 that weren't there in the previous times. Then now I come to some other issues here. What happens to India? Now, whatever you might say, T 1.0 was good for us. We signed all the known treaties which we had not signed earlier. LEMOA, COMCASA, BECA, everything was signed in that time. So, and the 2+2 started. He started calling Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific. He changed the name of the command to Indo-Pacific Command. So any which way, it was a great bonhomie. There was a Howdy India, which we remember, where he walked hand in hand with Prime Minister Modi all along together in New York. So, there was a bonhomie. It's not that he didn't make life difficult for us. He did, but his life making good with us was much more than the life being difficult with us. So then that's an issue out here that is important, that in any way it was a good thing. Will he continue in the same form with India? Well, that has to be seen. One major issue is that we signed in last 2 years a very major treaty with Biden, which is ICET, which is technology-based treaty. And this is it's not defense alone, it is broad-based. There's 7 pillars, and this is actually inviting major technology from the United States. The ICET is what we feel should be bedrock of technological development of India. Will President Trump support ICET? Well, that's a very difficult question. But maybe we need to start thinking today, do we need to rebrand ICET and change the nomenclature and call it something else? There was a DTTI earlier in President Trump's time that was removed by President Biden and started with ICET. Maybe we need to do some rebranding on these issues across the United States. Now, sorry, sir.
उसको ले जाओ यार, उसको क्यों दे दिया? आ जाओ.
Okay. Somebody telling me to go, sir?
ये मोहित है, इसका कुछ रिसाइकलिंग.
Okay. Now, I see many other issues which I think which are important for us to examine as far as him is concerned. What happened? India has moved from strength to strength between 2016-20 to 2024. We are coming out of our closet. I mean, we have come out of our closet. we are a part to reckon with. So that, have we entered the big boys club? Not very sure we've entered a big boys club, but we are there. We are knocking on the doors of the big boys club. So the Trump will recognize that India is a force to reckon with. And if the policies of President Biden or United States largely gave an impression sometime that a rising star or rising pole is not so advantageous to have in the world and India must be pulled down. Well, whether President Trump will follow the same policy of putting India under geopolitical pressure on various counts, as we have been seeing United States have been doing in last year or year plus, well, would that change? It looks it that his policies towards and his with Prime Minister Modi is different. In fact, I would like to highlight one issue here. Prime Minister Modi's tenure and President Trump's tenure are coterminous. They both have 4 years left. And if there is something to be gained by India to reach some kind of a level, if we say we want 2030 $7 trillion economy, well, these 4 years are going to be critical for us to ride on the shoulders of, even if we have to do of President Trump, and I don't mind President Xi Jinping, and ride to that level that we want to rise it here. To So, MAGA may be a charter which may be bad for many nations, but I don't think we should start thinking that it will be bad for us. It may be advantageous for us with President Trump coming in. India has to see about itself. I am not very sure, and of course, I'm not an economist, and I don't want to touch the issue of economists with such illustrious luminaries who are here. So even getting into economics is not going to be simple. But we need to pull up a sock someplace. How long can we carry ourselves on the shoulders of services sector? And when will we change over to merchandise and towards manufacturing? And that becomes the stepping stone for us to develop, for which United States is most important, because that's the biggest consumer market that exists across the world. And to say that we are exporting an Apple phone, so you sell an Apple phone $80, but you are importing stuff with $60 that goes into Apple phone is all bakwas. Yeah, that's not the way to develop. We have to start getting into the global value chains. We have to get ourselves indispensable to the United States and create of course, we are advantaged in many ways in the trade with United States, but we need to pull up our socks. Certain things are very clear. We need to get on. See, if nothing else, I have a child now, just picked up a daughter working in a bank here. So economy becomes of interest to us. उससे पहले economy का word आता नहीं था. फौज में हमको तो जरा हथियार चलाना आता था. So 1700 sorry sir, sorry, I'm sorry. So 1700 global capability centers have come up in India. This is significant. Every known firm in the world is establishing a global capability center in India. That means that there is something that we should take from India. Then, if there are UTC aerospace system establishing ourselves in Bangalore, these things matter a lot. So we need to get our house in order to take advantage of President Trump. Otherwise, if we are not pushing ourselves, we'll be pained in many manners. So our contribution to, and you all would know better, my little knowledge tells me our contribution to the global value chains is nothing to write home about. We need to pull up our socks and say we need to get into manufacturing at scale. If we don't manufacture at scale, then we will not be able to reach that the area that we have reached. I'll make 2 more points before I end here, sir. We have a large number of bilateral dialogues with the United States. some predate Biden, some was Biden's time, some predate even President Trump. There are 2+2, Defense Forum, SNT Forum, Counterterrorism, Security Council, Forum. I mean, I could recount about 20, 30 of them, which are bilateral in nature by various people who are discussing here. Will Trump do a whitewash to all these, which we have been going across for such a long time? Now, it's very difficult to do so. Then what about the Quad? Quad was started earlier, 2008, but Quad got its pump by President Trump. He restarted it, he re-energized it. So Quad, will he throw Quad away? Quad itself has got 8, 9 subgroups working. Then ICE has got many subgroups working. ICET. So I think we have now reached a place that we are tied together in many forms. My semi-last point before the wars. Is Trump good for us? Now, good question. The Trump is good. Maybe he'll allow us enhanced technology if he gives us a pump to ICET. Trump will also, maybe defense partnership will grow. Maybe more FDI flows. And presently, I don't think we were so advantaged by the movement of supply chains that moved away from China. Countries like Indonesia and Vietnam took maximum benefits out of the supply chains that moved out of China. We need to we need to, just a minute, sir. So we need to get to establish some kind of infrastructure. Fault, I think, and again, I am not an expert on it, fault lies in ourselves not providing the ease of business in India, where supply chains could establish themselves and we will be able to take maximum advantage. It may be problematic within India itself. What would be bad and ugly for us? What will be really bad for us in case of Trump? Many issues can go wrong. Trade deficit, trade escalation. When he starts doing tariff and trade, well, we could be in the receiving end of it. Bilateral relations will be dependent on this one. There is a trade deficit, and there's a persistent manner in which these things are growing. Now, I would regulatory challenges, because there are differences in regulatory challenges between India and them. What happens in case he becomes bonhomie towards China? Well, I don't think so. But what you can't push away Elon Musk. Yeah? Elon Musk has got maximum 70,000 odd American companies are working in China. They're not packing away and going away. Every known company. We cannot survive without China, because you want to buy Dell computers, or you want to HP computers, or you want to buy anything in the world, even American, that American corporations are linked with China. You are tied up between China and United States in a total difficult manner. So I think we need to now get pragmatic about whole thing, despite the border troubles that we have with the Chinese. I'll end by saying about the wars. So simple. Trump, what Biden has done in last 10 days is very, very instructive. He has ramped up, ratcheted up the war against Russia. It wasn't there till this time, but he has started it. He energized the war in last 10 days. I can take on question answers as to how they, and that has brought into a situation which is so difficult here. So I would like to say that that Ukraine war, he will work to stop it, 24 hours or whatever he does it. But he will not stop the Hamas war. Yesterday, he took credit for the Lebanon issue also. No, I brought the peace around here. So I think the Ukraine war is in trouble, and that's why Biden has pushed the war to an area where Trump, when he takes over, will not know what to do about that war. But Hamas is issue which he will carry to his heart to further. I think we are taking the rest of the issues on question answer session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Rakesh, Dr. Rakesh Sharma. We had a very comprehensive kind of the presentation between the two of the Lieutenant Generals, and I think now is a time for us to turn to the economic and trade implications, hopefully. But I think Ashima can bring in any other surprise also. So, Professor Ashima.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dholakia. Thank you, Charan Singh, for the invite and the kind introduction. It's really nice to see the EGROW webinars growing from strength to strength. I remember we discussed this and starting it during the pandemic, no? And it all. So it's really proved a very excellent platform you've put together. And I must mention that being an Army General's daughter, my father was a Major General in the Army Medical ANC. It's very nice to interact with two Lieutenant Generals and hear their views on this platform. Now, turning to economics and Trump, this is, as I was saying, Trump is very, very unpredictable. So therefore, one thing we are in for is a lot of uncertainty. Many potential shocks. It could be positive or negative. And I appreciate what the generals were saying in the sense there's so many questions from the press. Various people are concerned what will happen when Trump comes in. We cannot predict what will happen, but it's like we do in monetary policy, be forward-looking, try to make forecasts, and then strategize, decide what are the policy actions you should take today. There were several interesting suggestions that came earlier in this discussion. But I think when we look at what is happening in the globe in economic terms, we seem to have the world as a whole has survived really major shocks much better than expected. The US is heading for a soft landing after emerging markets were expected to, crisis was expected. Nothing of the sort has happened. All the debt levels have really gone up. India was expected to really have negative growth and financial sector to get much worse. Everything has improved. So, but I don't know how, and the term, what is it? I think pluri-shock for this time. So now Trump's election is another shock. And I don't know how robust in the world will be how many shocks we can take. But I think that for India, what has worked for us in these last 3-4 years in macroeconomic policy, which I've seen from close quarters, I think one major factor which we need to emphasize is our economic diversity. When there are external shocks, small nations who are dependent on, or China, which is dependent on exports, even though it's a big nation, we have a very diverse, we have all sectors and we have services exports, we have agriculture, we have a large domestic demand, pretty good balance between investment, consumption, savings, government expenditure. So all this I find the press, for example, would always question us as MPC members, and I found them to be so focused on America, what the US does. And I think partly that's because many analysts are mediating funds from the US or are involved with US investment banks and so on. So there's this, or my third hypothesis is just there's so much news about the US, everybody's reading that, hearing that, and therefore talking about it. But I think our experience the last 3-4 years, for example, and this was one thing we in the MPC kept trying to communicate, that we have freedom from US policy. We have the ability to counter shocks, to set policy to suit the domestic cycle. And I think one of the things that worked was that immediately after the pandemic, policy was counter-cyclical. it did not overreact. It was not the stimulus like after the global financial crisis, we had avoided too much stimulus. And then we went into double deficits and all kinds of problems. So then through the 2010s, monetary financial policy was extra tight. So now I think during the pandemic period, we got it right. And this, what I say, counter-cyclical policy, both financial, regulatory, monetary, fiscal, and it worked to smoothen shocks. So, you know, while I was listening, because today the GDP numbers were released at 4 o'clock, I just checked those and it is horrifying. You know, our GDP growth has collapsed to 5.4% in Q2, compared to the RBI's forecast of 7, the Finance Ministry's forecast of 6.5. Now, for the past so many months in the MPC, we had been warning about this, because this is our experience, my experience in the 2010s also. Whenever real rates rise above a certain level, it's very negative for demand. So the major sectors that have contracted are manufacturing and exports. So this brings me to another issue. You know, the traditional thinking in emerging markets is that if there is a global shock, there's everybody talks about geoeconomics, geopolitical problems, then emerging markets need to become tightened, you know, to be wary. So, but smoothing shocks is the opposite of that. We know that there were problems in exports as China slowed and so on, and global growth was not that good. So you need to compensate, you know, with encouraging domestic demand. But we were tightening, we had fiscal consolidation, monetary tightening, as well as global growth, which had not increased as much. So we are seeing that this aspect of counter-cyclical domestic policy and smoothing shocks is very, very important. And we should learn from what has worked in the past and be prepared to do this in the future as we face potential uncertainties with Trump. And so the other important thing is for policy to be data-based, event-based. We try to be ready strategically, but then we have to react to incoming data and events as they happen. Global growth, the estimates, there are many analysts who make these sort of estimates. Global growth has been about 3% the last year. And the forecasts are similar, because the view is that although US growth will fall, expected to fall from about 3 to 2%, if Trump does all that he's promised to do, which is cut immigration, raise tariffs, and restructure the government, that is cut government spending. All this is seriously deflationary. And if inflation rises because of those tariffs, the Fed will not be able to cut as much as was expected. So it's going to be, and Trump's view is that all this raising tariffs will bring in FDI into the US, et cetera, and you know, be one up on their rivals like China. But this is, if it happens, it will be long run. In the short run, there are going to be a lot of problems. Similarly, China's growth will fall, but China has already, the government has pumped in some stimulus. So the growth forecasts for China are not very much of a contraction, more of a contraction for the US. And for us, since we export more to the US, our exports are going to be adversely affected. So we need to counter with domestic stimulus, be ready for that. Again, Europe is in a tough situation, especially if the US stops supporting their war. But then, you know, we cannot predict what will happen, because governments might counter with stimulus and other policies. It might force them to really restructure and do things that might help Europe. So there are a lot of uncertainties. And to emphasize again that aspect of Trump being irrational, you know, in economics we study game theory, and in game theory equilibrium, very often we say that the party that is irrational, the party where you cannot predict what he or she is going to do, that person's strategy tends to dominate. Because other people are just so this Trump's promise to end the Ukraine war, despite the recent escalation we are seeing, it might happen even for Palestine. I've heard, it might be just a rumor, I've heard that he's told Netanyahu that you do what you want up till I come into power. After that, you have to end this war. Because that was his election plan, that Harris would lead the world to World War III and he's going to end the wars. So if the wars end or go into lower sort of equilibrium, the forecast is that oil prices will fall towards 60 and below. That will be a big positive for India. It will really reduce our inflation and give more policy room. And overall, when two giants are fighting, the third in line, that is India, can perhaps do better in many ways, because even though Trump loves to fight, he can't fight alone. He has to have some allies. And as General Sharma was saying, there are many kind of, there is a deeply entrenched kind of agreements and common strategies with the US, which Trump himself contributed to. And some of this should go ahead. We have a large diaspora in the US and a lot of business interests. This thing about that India has not done so well out of diversification. These things happen slowly, they take time. And but we have the largest number of US companies coming into us because they want to diversify from China. While most of the East Asian Chinese companies are going to Vietnam and so on, East Asia. So that creates a huge sort of lobby for India-US relationships, and as well as our diaspora. So I think that on the whole, we should, and I was reading recently that Vietnam is running into capacity constraints. So as this diversity, the 70,000 US companies, as more and more, they can't all go to Vietnam, more and more have to come into India. And India has the advantage of large domestic demand and highest growth among major countries in the world, and therefore the large domestic market, which is also an attraction. Of course, we have to continue to improve our ease of doing business, etc. So then the other negative economic aspect is that Trump's policies, higher inflation, higher US interest rates will keep US Treasury yield somewhat higher, above 4% expected to. And that is a negative for a lot of foreign portfolio flows into emerging markets, because if the so-called secure asset is giving you such high returns, you prefer to go there. But in India, one of our policy successes has been really low exchange rate volatility, and that is a positive for debt flows. Then we have been put in some of these global indices, which brings in more long-term kind of capital. So overall, we should see continuing inflows, and there will continue to be some cuts in the US interest rates, because the Fed is much above its neutral rate. They raised rates so steeply, the inflation was in double digits. It has come down to 3, and the forecasts are it will continue to fall, maybe more slowly. So it will be between 2 and 3%. But still, there's room for them to cut one. The neutral rate is between 3 and 4. So there's a lot of room for them to cut, which can be stimulus for the world also. Then one big threat for emerging markets is the continuing large US deficits and their debt, which is expected to continue to rise, although they're doing quite well in economic terms. So here we have Musk coming in, promising to do this, because otherwise, even Kamala Harris, they were promising all kinds of schemes, and Biden spent so much on his Inflation Reduction Act, all these wars he's been fighting, just increasing US deficits have been around 7% and expected to stay there because their social security spending, their discretionary spending is just 30%. So let us see what Musk does. If he can really make the government more efficient and reduce debt, that will be one major global risk that is reduced, because large debt can, although markets and higher US Treasury yields, although markets have absorbed it so far, you never know when there'll suddenly be kind of crisis and outflows or sharp shooting of interest rates. That is a risk hovering there. So I think I'll stop there. Yeah. If there are any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ashima, for really giving us some broader perspectives. And you know, since I also happen to be an economist and less of the defense analyst in a way, so naturally my comments will be more on the economic aspects. While Ashima really gave a very, very sound kind of reasoning and arguments to expect a sort of a downturn in the growth of US over a longer period because of the Trump policy, expected Trump policies and other things. And of course, the inflation in US likely to pick up rather than come down to 2% in the long run. The market seems to be exactly, moving in the other direction. The markets have practically assumed that with Trump, the dollar is likely to be a stronger currency. And it has already started moving towards that kind of a thing. Dollar has already appreciated considerably vis-a-vis various other currencies, including Indian rupee. And that implies that basically the inflation differential between the countries, particularly US and the rest of the world, is likely to be, in the other direction, in the sense that the inflation rate differentials are likely to be rising, because that is the reason why the US dollar will be appreciating. If the US dollar becomes stronger, it has an implication about the Indian monetary policy, because in that case, we have to very, very systematically take into account the tendencies and trends for the Indian rupee to depreciate more than what it has been depreciating. If that is the case, there is a fear for a sort of the imported inflation. That could be a fear. If that is the case, the monetary policy will have to be very, very cautious in easing out over a longer period. That is what is expected in India. But if the rupee is having a depreciating tendencies, then we will have to be somewhat more cautious. Rupee can also be depreciating because the capital flows can be the other way around, in the sense that the capital investments, the FDIs, etc., can flow out of India and go back to the US. That is also one of the reasons. The other aspect which is very significant is that, and that is what Ashima has already pointed out, that the trend in the global oil prices is likely to be on a falling side, in the sense that because the impact of President Trump taking over in USA is directly to hurt the growth expectations in China. And if China by any chance is expected to slow down, the demand for oil will fall. And if the demand for oil falls, naturally the prices are likely to be, coming down. If that happens, it is a very positive for Indian economy because it also has a counterbalancing effect. For fiscal policy, it is always going to be very positive. But even for the monetary policy, it is also a positive development. Which means that on the whole, if you consider these three things, that the inflation in US may not rise in an ultimate sense of the term, and if at all the inflation differential with the rest of the world is likely to actually widen. That is, the inflation in US may be lower and the inflation in the rest of the world may be higher. And that is the kind of a thing that is happening. If dollar is becoming stronger and if the oil prices are likely to soften so considerably, on the whole, in the net, India is likely to be benefited. I think that is the kind of the thing. So when Dr. Rakesh was talking about whether Trump is beneficial to India, well, it appears that he will be. But I'm not too sure. Ashima may not agree with that. And of course, these are all the personal views, and we can always debate about this thing. With this short remarks, I open the floor for question answers. Incidentally, if I'll give a chance to Ashima in case she wants to, contradict or say anything.
No, I was meaning to talk about the rupee and then I forgot. So it's good you brought it up because, again, this is our experience in this MPC. In 2022, with the Ukraine war and there were outflows. In the pandemic time, there were outflows. So immediately there's so much concern and the dollar was strengthening with safe haven flows to the US. And the rupee depreciation was minimal compared to emerging markets. There was, I think what has helped is the deepening of our gradual kind of, our foreign exchange markets are quite developed and so on. They say they're not doing too much intervention, but also a lot of Indian banks now take positions in the NDF. So the crisis volatility that used to come from NDFs to India is not there so much, I think, maybe. But if India grows and there are reforms and productivity improves, that's another factor that leads towards real appreciation. So what the fear among analysts is as soon as reserves start falling, as long as reserves are increasing, it's okay. Even if you have $700 billion, it starts decreasing, they get worried. Because they think it can get wiped out. They wanted us to let the rupee go, the rupee should sink. But again, my research and a lot of research on emerging markets shows that the one factor that really helps reduce emerging market currency risk and therefore interest rate spreads is having reserves and reducing lower currency volatility, because a float leads to too much volatility. And even exporters say they don't want a fluctuating rupee. Steady rupee, even if it's slightly appreciated, is better for them than a depreciation that comes from a sharp fall, because in the negotiations and so on, since we import largely commodities and we export goods where there is monopolistic markets, we don't get so much pass through, etc., etc. So the sum of the thing is that experience over these past few shocks shows that we can manage the rupee. We have enough reserves. Even if the dollar is strengthening, the rupee will not depreciate that much. There are factors making for appreciation. So that aspect of inflation and its ill effects is likely to be minimal.
No, very true. In fact, I never meant that rupee will sharply depreciate, not at all. In fact, rupee has already come to a reasonably stable state thanks to the RBI's policies and other things.
The other thing is that, sorry,
please.
No, the other thing is that when the rupee was fluctuating, was more volatile in the 2010s, there was a real appreciation, which hurt our exports. But today you see the real effective exchange rate is near equilibrium, near about 100, which is normally worked. And we are seeing some improvement in exports because of other policies also. So there has to be a balance. You can't let the rupee appreciate too much,
Yes,
but you
yes,
don't
yes.
want it to depreciate. And I think we maintained that balance quite well the last few years.
No, very true. In fact, there is a trend of depreciating, and that trend continues. I mean, it is a very marginal rate at which it is depreciating, but that marginal rate of depreciation is a welcome thing in a way.
Yes,
And
because
it is not
inflation
likely to be
differentials.
for
And
various
inflation-
reasons that, yeah, for various reasons that you have pointed out. I mean, India can grow very fast. India's productivity can grow very fast. India's inflation is reasonably under control and is likely to be under control. And the very fact that, the oil prices are expected to again be favorable, and you find that the Indian rupee, because dollar is becoming stronger, Indian rupee might have the pressure. I mean, with all these things put together, maybe that India is likely to experience a reasonably stable currency, reasonably stable exchange rate. So that is not the ultimate. I'm talking about the delta. I would say the partial derivatives in a strong strictest sense of the term, not the total differential. Total differential is likely to be reasonably controllable. Anyway, having said this, I open the floor for questions, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions for our defense experts. So both the lieutenant generals should be ready to face all these kind of questions. Over to Dr. Charan Singh for the questions.
Yeah, I think there are a few questions in the chat box, and I think General Rakesh Sharma had to leave a little early because I had said we'll close by 5, maximum 5:10. So he just sent me a message. I think General Sharma has left. Am I right?
It seems, yeah.
Yeah, it seems he has left. So we have General Rajeshwar then. Yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat box, of course, but I would have a question for actually both General and Professor Ashima. Like we have, and I would agree with you, actually it's a puzzle, I'm not very sure myself. Both of you have said that he's a very uncertain, unpredictable person and sometimes very impulsive. But look at his own personal business. That has only increased and gone to a very different level over the years. So I would say, though he looks impulsive and unpredictable, at least his objective is very clear, and that is profit maximization. If I take his personal business, and if we take the American objective of making America great that he is trying to say, and that would imply employment, and GDP growth in America, and inflation control. I think singular objective that he will pursue, and to pursue that singular objective, he will do anything. I think that is where his unpredictability, uncertainty is. What will be his next step to ensure that America comes first? So I would then say that protectionism is going to be his buzzword. That would be my analysis. And I'm really happy to take a view from both of you. And then, of course, we have couple of questions in the chat box if any one of you wants to take it. Yeah. I would leave it to Professor Dholakia chairing it how he wants the issues answers to be done by the two speakers.
Shall I request Charan Singh to spell out 2-3 more questions also, because
Sure.
all of these questions can be taken then simultaneously. And
Sure.
I will give first a chance to our Lieutenant General to answer them, and then Ashima can take over.
So, General Rajeshwar, there is a question for you which I have asked you almost every time we have met. Do we see an end to the wars? Remember when the Ukraine-Russia war started, we both were debating will it last 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and we thought it'll end soon, end soon, end soon, but never seems to end. So here is a question which you may like to answer. And Professor and Dr. Rakesh, of course, said that he will probably bring an end to Ukraine war, but he will not bring an end to the Gaza Strip. So I don't know how you want to react. So that's one question. I think the question for Professor Ashima is, will India's growth rate improve in the next year? And I think that question comes from your observation that GDP data is showing 5.4 growth in Q2 over the growth rate of 8.1% in Q2 of the previous year. Professor Ashima, you know that you were in MPC and the interest rates I have been arguing are too high for growth to really take off. Maybe that's the question they have, but I leave it to you how you wish to answer that. The other question that has come up is, and this is a very sensitive question, General. I do not know how you will handle it. Will India continue to be US confidant, particularly in the case of the neighbors in South Asia? At least in recent months, USA has proven something else. Okay. The other question is, can Trump help us in foreign relations with our, and this is Chetan who's asking this. He's saying, can Trump help us in foreign relations with our, in brackets, sinking neighbors? Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nepal, bracket close. Okay. And then there is very, very sensitive questions which I was expecting may turn up. Okay, here's another question. This is, are we, and this is a very good question, are we concentrating too much on one personality? Are we not missing the US for any third world country as having no permanent policy to guide their future? Now, as we generally hear that interests are permanent and personalities only influence but cannot make clean sweep from a country's best interests. Yeah.
I think we have enough number of questions and our plates will be full. We can start, responding to them.
Right.
I think we should give approximately 7 to 8 minutes to each one of them to respond. So please start.
Right. Thanks, Chair. So these, bouquet of questions. How I look at it is, yes, Trump has been successful as far as, his own businesses are concerned. No doubt about that. And when he came, he brought a very refreshing change because he was not a politician to start with. I mean, change as far as America was concerned. But what happens in, from the stream that he has come and the success that he has enjoyed, a lot of things one reads is transactional behavior. So there is, if you look at it, a number of deals, which he called deals, which are pacts, which were there before and which needed correction. He changed them all. He actually went back even on Iran, like I said, and on many other pacts and policies. So when that kind of transaction happens, there is a churn. And while this may be good for business or not so good for business, depending on where you are based, there is always a global reaction to it, because now this game is not being played within a particular, confined level. And it, since these intersections between foreign policy, economy, strategy in the military side, all this intersects. So all these sectors actually, get affected. For example, in Trump 1.0, you heard that we signed so many pacts, whether it's Lemoa, Comcasa, Gisomia, Becca, and so on. Obviously, this is what the US wanted to come closer to India geostrategically. But also what happened simultaneously was that there were, indicators given that, yes, if you do business with Russia, you will get affected because we are the ones who have the technology. So this was the broader understanding. I'm very happy that, we have followed through with the ISET. But this is where this kind of behavior, affects globally. It may become actually at the end of 2.0, if you forecast. And one of the contingencies is that it will actually benefit Americans if they concentrate on themselves a little more. But their global influence will reduce. And the benefactors, for example, his pact with Afghanistan affected us in South Asia. If he hadn't done the pact, maybe it would have been more stable than it is at the moment. We have had to recover ground. But this kind of behavior, then geostrategically makes a big difference. So I wouldn't be, I think we need to really see whether he's going to change his previous policies. And knowing he's successful, his success to me means success for America. So whether it means success for India, can we ride on it? Are we ready to receive benefits that may come our way? I'm uncertain about it. I'm not sure about it. Right. The second question was, do we see an end to the war? I remember Professor Charan asking me, I think within a week or 3 days of the war breaking out, what do you see? I told him, let's wait and hold our horses, because I think it's too early. We can't predict one way or the other. And I'm glad I, understood that. And I think we did a event within a month. And some of those things have come true, some have. Okay, will this war end? Now, if you look at what Ukraine wants, Ukraine has declared, or Zelensky for that matter, has declared that I want all the territory I lost to Russia back. So if I want it back, this is not what Trump can offer. And this is definitely not what Putin will give. So how will he come to the table? So one thought process we are told is that the US is promising that, okay, we will give aid. And perhaps I think they're also looking at, that is arms aid. They'll continue supplying, but it will be conditional that you come to the peace table or talks. 1. 2, post reconstruction aid also, we will either organize or, they will push maybe other countries to give. And that includes Russia, incidentally. As far as Putin is concerned, why should he come to the table? He can come only if there is some assurance that Ukraine does not become part of NATO, and B, that nothing inimical to Russia is put on Ukrainian soil, which is whether it's missiles or any other thing, that is all not put. So all this will have to be promised. So this we have to see. And till that time now, as I've said, the war has got accentuated because of this decision, which has just been taken a week back. So storm shadows have already hit, which hits 550. It's an air, launched cruise missile. Then there is the ACMs, which is a tactical missile which goes 300 kilometers. Even that has been fired. So we don't know what is going to go next. And even it's not in war zones, it's very difficult to predict. Strategically, it's easy for me to sit here and, give a bit of a prognosis, but it might not hold really, even for 45 days. But yes, the work, like I said, General Kellogg has already been appointed, and I'm sure he's working at it. So this is how I look at the Ukraine war. As far as Gaza is concerned, Trump appears to be very clear and consistent with his previous policy. He will continue to support Israel. So the pressure that America was putting, or the Biden administration was putting on Israel to come to talks with Hamas, will actually be pulled back a bit. Okay. Somebody asked a question, can Trump help us with our neighbors? I think, see, a lot of times, geopolitically, levers have to be pulled to bring an adversary to the table and to understand our point of view. But no, maximum of the heavy lifting with our neighbors has to be done by us. No one else can do it. How well we do it, if our reading is we need to do better, I'm for that. I think we can't rely on anyone else, because American, US national interests, or for that matter, national interests of any other country, will not be our national interest. Somewhere they'll coincide, somewhere there'll be gaps. So we can't just bank on other people's largesse. We have to do things ourselves. So I don't think there's any requirement, or, we shouldn't look at people. We should look at, okay, they should not come in the way, even if they don't support us. Then there was a question of personality-based decision making. So I'm actually, here strategy, military overlaps with economy. If I were to quote Thomas Schelling, who was a very renowned economist, he did the game theory in the strategy of conflict, right? And then also he wrote Arms and Influence, which is also both are guidebooks actually. So like the professor said, she said that the most unpredictable person actually decides how the entire thing pans out. So I don't think we can define individuals as defending or signifying their national interests. But often what happens is the long game, the national interest will remain the same. It is the execution part of it in which personalities matter. Sometimes you go fast, sometimes you go slow. But it makes a difference. It surely makes a difference. It can't be discounted. However, national interests are in the long run. So what is, like what I said, 2018 national security strategy is still holding good. There's no change to it. You're seeing in 2024. So he's come back, but his strategy of 18 is still working. So this is how I think I don't know whether I've missed any question, but I think that's where I should end. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajeshwar.
Thank
Now,
you, sir.
Professor Ashima, Goyal, you can take the time and conclude almost. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I agree with the general that ultimately we have to be responsible for our own, relationships with our neighbors, and we cannot ride on the US. And what the US or anyone respects is economic strength. So we have to build our economic strength, and that is what will give us the best results. Now, I agree with Charan that Trump's policy is America first, and he has been a successful businessman. But the problem is that he is willing to give shocks, to do some large things, for example, and there is no agreement among economists on if they work or not. There's tariffs, because if there is retaliation, so can he, as a businessman, cow down all his opponents, scare them so much that they won't retaliate? Is he going to? It's really a war, and you don't know how it will turn out. And then some of the things he wants to do, like reduce migration, I think that has been a strength for America. we are seeing many European countries, for example, slowing because of aging. Japan, America has attracted young people that have provided the lifeblood to its economy. Now it's going to just uproot people, send them back. It'll be very, very disruptive to the economy. So, but he thinks it will create jobs or more high-paying jobs for his constituency, the red states of America. So let us see what happens. This question on if growth will improve next year. As I was saying, if we learn the lesson that policy needs to be counter-cyclical, we have to use the diversity and economic strength of our own economy to counter the shocks that we face, then definitely growth can revive. And there is one view which says that there are some structural problems in India, K-shaped and low demand, and which can't be solved with macro policies. So you need fundamental reforms. But that view, I think, our post-pandemic experience, because you cannot have 3 years of robust growth. The bounce back is only 1 year, 2 years, but it continues for 3 years. That means there are not structural problems. Again, looking at the disaggregated data that's come in today, suggests that the slowdown is cyclical, because the major, people were saying consumption slowdown. Consumption has not slowed down that much if you look at the consumption growth. Government spending slowdown. Government spending also has not slowed down that much. What has really slowed is manufacturing and exports, which are demand, the effect of slowing demand that was not countered with domestic policy. So if we take this lesson and adjust policies accordingly, growth can recover, in my view. Yeah. And I think really, if I have to say closing for this conference, I would say that we must value and sustain our own strength, that we have the capability to ensure that our country does well, no matter what happens in the US, and whatever happens in the globe, we can also use it to keep India first. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You have already summarized, I think both Rajeshwar and Ashima have summarized the things toward the end of their response. I don't want to add anything more, because this is as speculative a discussion as it could be. But what is relevant is that I think Trump, since he is a very successful businessman, he knows that the strategy is being unpredictable. So, I mean, in a game theoretic framework, a person who is unpredictable is, as Ashima had very rightly said, is always likely to dominate the strategy. But anyway, so that is the point. And we have to be therefore guessing. Not only that, the most relevant matter for us is do our homework thoroughly well and wait for the right opportunity to strike. That is the best strategy for us under this kind of circumstances. Over to you, Charan.
Thank you very much. Each one of you brought so much of wealth of experience and knowledge on this very, very speculative, as Professor Dholakia put it, very, very speculative discussion, but we are getting ready for it. And I think, therefore, extremely important that we had done this discussion. At least we now recognize the features of things which are going to unfold before us. So thank you very much, Professor Dholakia, for chairing it, and General Rajeshwar, General Rakesh, and Professor Ashima for accepting at such a short notice and helping us organize this discussion, which I thought is very pertinent. In my own mind at EGROW, we were debating, should we do it in January after he takes over, or should we do this right now? And then we said, it's better to do it right now. And so we canceled the scheduled one for today and brought this in. And I must thank you for cooperating and then sparing time to be with us. For about 4 months back, we had requested Osamu Yamamoto to speak on bonds market. And my feeling was things will be moving smoothly, and therefore bonds market discussion in December, just before the monetary policy, will be the right thing. By the way, things are not moving smoothly. As you have just seen in today's discussion, the G-Sex market and the US bonds, the US bond market is behaving differently. As Professor Dholakia mentioned, the dollar could be strengthening and everybody is anticipating that. Professor Ashima says oil prices could come down to $60 a barrel, total uncertainty. So I do not know what Osamu Yamamoto is going to talk to us on bonds market next Friday, but we are going to go ahead with this discussion on the bonds market. He is the CEO of Unison Capital Management, Singapore-based company, Japanese himself. So I'm expecting a very interesting discussion next week. Now, because of the time difference, we will be doing the discussion just around lunch. I think 2 to 3 p.m. That part we have to decide with Osamu, and then I'll send you the flyer. So I look forward to your participation next week, and week after that, as I've mentioned to you, the second part of Trump and the new international economic order will be discussed. With this, let me thank each one of you once again for being with us, and to the panelists and to the chair of the session to have shared your wisdom with us. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday.
Thank you, Dr. Charan. Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor Goyal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to make one quick announcement. On December 2, we are having the Shadow Monetary Policy Committee meeting. I'll send the flyer out for that also. It's generally between 3 and 4 p.m., 1 hour, 8 speakers, and it goes rapid, like a rapid fire. So you're most welcome for that interesting discussion. And you know it's going to be more interesting after today's data that you have just seen has walked in for GDP. So if you have time, please join us for that. Today's discussion will be on our website by tomorrow. Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good evening.